My daughter-in-law called me dead weight, right in front of my grandchildren. So I smiled, stood up from her perfect kitchen table, and quietly pulled the rope that held up their entire lifestyle. No more tuition, no more mortgage, no more rescue. I'd co-signed every dream they claimed as their own. Now they'll learn what gravity feels like without my name holding them up. And the silence I left behind? It's finally louder than their entitlement. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The sun spilled through Ryan and Stephanie's tall windows, glinting off every polished surface. The house looked perfect. Open concept, curated, airbrushed for strangers, but it felt brittle underneath, like glass stretched too thin. Lillian Hart sat at the far end of the table, her coffee cooling beside untouched cinnamon rolls. She'd brought jam in a glass jar, the kind she still made by hand. No one had opened it. Stephanie preferred store-bought convenience. Ryan hovered, performing hospitality. More coffee, Mom? Just a half cup, she said, gentle. Across the table, Ava scrolled on her phone. Lucas drummed against his orange juice glass. Stephanie's voice carried like perfume, pleasant until it lingered too long. So, she said, glancing at Ryan, the realtor thinks we can refinance again this spring. He smiled, thin and eager. Might free up some cash flow. Lillian only nodded. She'd heard those words before. Refinance, cash flow. Each one a bandage on a wound they refused to treat. When the plates began to clear, she rose automatically. Let me help with the dishes. Stephanie laughed, light but sharp. No offense, but dead weight should sit still. The words cracked the air. Ava froze. Lucas blinked. Ryan's hand stilled mid-motion, then kept moving as if he hadn't heard. Lillian sat down again. She reached for her cup, steady. You're right, she said quietly. I've done enough lifting. No one met her eyes. Stephanie began stacking plates with brisk efficiency. The children retreated into silence. Ryan disappeared into the kitchen's safe noise. 10 minutes later, Lillian's coat was on. Thank you for breakfast, she said, and walked into the cold Boise air without waiting for a reply. At home, the quiet greeted her like an old friend. Elaine Porter's voice came through the speakerphone, low and sure. She really said that? Dead weight, in front of the kids, Elaine whistled. You let them climb with your rope for years. Maybe it's time you cut it. Lillian watched the wind push through her bare rose bushes. They'd fall hard. Then they'll finally learn the ground's real, Elaine said. Lillian smiled faintly. Maybe I've been cushioning the landing too long. That night she moved through the house with purpose, shutting off lights one by one until only her desk lamp glowed. From the closet she drew out a small fireproof box, its metal cool against her palm. Inside lay the key to her safe deposit box, and a folder she hadn't opened in years. She laid the papers across the desk. Loan statements, wire transfers, deeds. Her handwriting in blue ink marched across every page, proof of the life she'd been underwriting. 10 years of rescues disguised as gifts. Ryan's business loan, the kids' tuition, the second SUV she'd co-signed for because it was safer for the family. Each sheet whispered the same confession. She'd built them a world on her credit and called it love. The clock ticked. Outside, wind brushed the windows, carrying the faint chime her husband had hung decades ago. Lillian touched one of the documents, the mortgage note that still bore her signature. She remembered his warning, love without limits becomes debt. He'd been right, and tomorrow she would start paying herself back. She gathered every page, slid them into the envelope, and sealed it. The sound was small but final. No confrontation, no scene. Just signatures and silence. Lillian switched off the lamp and sat in the dark a moment longer. The reflection in the window caught her eye, her face calm, her shoulders squared. Not fragile, not dead weight. A gust rattled the chime again, louder this time. It almost sounded like applause. Morning light slid across the mahogany surface of Craig Mendel's desk, pooling on the stack of folders waiting for review. Lillian sat across from him, spine straight, hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked like a woman about to balance an account because she was. Craig adjusted his reading glasses and opened the file she'd brought. The papers spread between them like a confession. 10 years of this? He asked, scanning the pages. 11, she corrected softly. I started when Ryan lost his job at the dealership. He flipped through statements, tuition payments, loan transfers, co-sign agreements. Each page held her quiet handwriting, each number a story of rescue disguised as love. The rustle of paper filled the office, a dry, measured sound that reminded her of counting bills in the bank vault where she'd once worked. Craig looked up. You're not on the house title. No, she said. But I co-signed the mortgage. They needed my credit to qualify. He exhaled, slow and heavy. And this business loan. Hart Family Services. That's your son's company, she nodded. It's been dissolving since last year, but the debt remains mine. Craig removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Lillian, this entire lifestyle, house, schooling, business, vehicles, every bit of it stands on your name. Lillian's gaze didn't waver. Then it's time I take it back. Silence filled the room, thick as dust. Outside the window, traffic hummed faintly along Grove Street. Somewhere a horn blared, distant and irrelevant. Craig studied her for a long moment, the tidy blouse, the calm expression that hid something sharper underneath. Are you sure? He asked. Disassociating from family finances is permanent. It's not just paperwork. It's a clean cut. That's exactly what I need, she said. Clean, final. He opened a drawer and drew out a fresh legal pad. All right, let's start untangling the web. For the next hour, she watched him draft, cross-reference, and annotate. Legal terms blurred into rhythm: revocation, withdrawal, liability release. Each signature line he prepared felt like a stitch being pulled from an old seam. Craig explained as he worked. We'll remove you as guarantor on the business accounts. The mortgage, though, since you co-signed, they'll need to refinance without you. That could force a reassessment. Lillian's voice was even. If it does, so be it. They built their house on a loan I carried. It's time they feel its weight. Craig gave a small, admiring smile. I've handled divorces with less emotion than this. It's not about anger, she said. It's about balance. I let my son's family borrow more than money. They borrowed my peace. He nodded and began printing documents. The machine's hum filled the space. Lillian stared at the slow crawl of paper emerging from the tray. It reminded her of years slipping away. Each sheet a month she'd spent swallowing pride in exchange for family harmony. When the printer fell silent, Craig stacked the pages and tapped them square. You'll need to sign these before a notary. I can have my assistant witness today if you're ready. I'm ready, she said. Her pen moved in smooth, deliberate strokes. Each signature felt lighter than the one before. By the final page, she realized her hand no longer trembled. Craig gathered the signed set, slid them into a crisp envelope, and placed it before her. Once filed, these documents will begin the separation. Accounts will be frozen. Automatic payments stopped. Lillian looked at the envelope. So this is it? 10 years undone by paper. Paper's what held it together, he said. It's only fair it ends the same way. She smiled faintly at the precision of it. Numbers, ink, consequence. All the language she understood best. Craig cleared his throat. I'll call you when the filings go through. Might be a few days. No hurry, she said, standing. They won't see it coming anyway. Outside, Boise's winter light had turned silver. Snow clouds gathered low over the foothills, soft and heavy as she walked to her car. Her breath fogged the air. She could almost taste the quiet that waited ahead. Before turning the key, she looked at the envelope resting on the passenger seat. Inside it, her freedom, unassuming, legally notarized, irreversible. She reached over, placed her hand atop it, and whispered, "Let's see how they climb now." A gust of wind rattled the bare branches outside the window, sharp, insistent, as if echoing her thought. The first text came on a Tuesday morning, wrapped in politeness like a trap. Stephanie, hey Lillian, quick few things. School trip deposit is due Friday, $450. HVAC checkup next week. Ryan says $300. And the roof's got a little leak, just FYI. Can we pull from the usual account? Lillian read it twice, thumb hovering above the screen. The message was cheerful, punctuated with emojis, but the undertone was expectation. Muscle memory, not malice. Stephanie didn't ask if Lillian could help. She assumed. Lillian placed her phone down beside her coffee mug, letting the words cool in the silence. The envelope from Craig still sat on the counter where she'd left it after returning from his office, the corner slightly bent from her hand resting on it the night before. It looked harmless. It wasn't. She typed back slowly, deliberately, "I'm reviewing all future commitments." Then she set the phone face down and went to wash her cup. By noon, the next tremor hit. Ryan's name appeared on the caller ID, followed by silence when she didn't answer. A minute later, the phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail. His voice was low, coaxing, the tone of a man trying to diffuse something without quite knowing what it is. "Hey, Mom. Steph said you might be a little off today. We'll talk later, yeah? No big deal." She could hear the forced calm, the careful balance of loyalty and fear. Ryan always thought diplomacy could save him. He never learned that silence speaks louder than compromise. In the kitchen, the clock ticked toward afternoon. The house felt lighter, less occupied by invisible debts. Lillian slipped on her coat and drove into town, the air outside sharp with the smell of snow. Boise West Bank looked just as it had for decades. Brick facade, clean glass doors, the faint hum of fluorescent lights. She'd walked through those doors thousands of times during her working years. Today she walked through them as someone taking back ownership of her name. A young teller greeted her with a bright, rehearsed smile. "Mrs. Hart, what can I help you with today?" "I'd like to freeze a few automatic payments," Lillian said. "Effective immediately." The teller blinked. "Of course. Which accounts?" Lillian opened her notebook, pages neat as ledger lines. 2 outgoing transfers to Ryan Hart and Stephanie Hart. Joint household account ending in 3179. The teller hesitated. "Would you like a temporary hold or—" "Permanent," Lillian said, her tone even but unmovable. A few keystrokes later, the teller's smile softened into something else. Respect, maybe, or quiet recognition. "All right, it's done. You'll receive written confirmation within 24 hours. Lillian signed the authorization. The pen didn't tremble once. On her way out, she passed a family at the counter, a mother helping her teenage son open his first savings account. Their laughter trailed through the lobby, light and unguarded. Lillian paused, watching them for a second longer than she meant to. Then she stepped into the cold, pulled her coat tighter, and exhaled. The air felt different, thinner but clean. That evening, Stephanie's anger finally reached full volume. In their glossy kitchen, she paced barefoot across marble tile, her voice echoing against the high ceilings. "She's playing games, Ryan. Your mother's playing games." Ryan rubbed the back of his neck, his tie loose, his face drawn. "Maybe she's just tired. You know how she gets. She'll come around," Stephanie laughed without humor. "She's reviewing commitments. What is that supposed to mean? That's not normal language. That's something you say before you fire someone." He sighed, lowering his voice. "Steph, just let her cool off. Don't push it right now." "Right now," she snapped. "The credit card bill's due. The school called about tuition, so yeah, I'm going to push it." She threw her phone onto the counter, the sound sharp as glass hitting granite. The screen flashed briefly, Lillian's last text still visible, just one line, calm, final. Back in her own kitchen, Lillian sat across from Elaine, who was stirring tea with the confidence of someone used to verdicts, not sympathy. "So it's done?" Elaine asked. Lillian nodded. "Transfers frozen, accounts locked." Elaine's grin was wolfish. "Good. Let them taste the silence you've swallowed." Lillian smiled faintly. "It's quieter than I thought it would be." "Quiet has weight," Elaine said. "And they're about to feel all of it." That night, Lillian opened her ledger one last time before bed, drew a neat line beneath the last recorded payment, and wrote 3 words in her careful script: "No further balance." Outside, the snow began to fall, soft, relentless, erasing tracks she no longer needed to follow. The email arrived at 6:42 a.m., subject line bright and chirpy. "Excited for Saturday. Rustic elegance at Lillian's place." Lillian frowned at the subject line. She hadn't agreed to host anything, certainly not a party. She clicked it open anyway. Stephanie's name gleamed at the top, her signature block boasting "Event Consultant, Hart Family Services." The message was long, bullet-pointed, enthusiastic. Catering deposit confirmed. Floral delivery scheduled. Parking plan attached. 40 guests expected. RSVP link below. Halfway down, Lillian stopped reading. Her address was listed under venue. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Then, without a sound, she pressed delete. She didn't reply, didn't call, just watched the message disappear like smoke. By mid-morning, the sky had turned the color of steel. A storm building. She sat at her dining table, her ledger open to a clean page. No payments, no names, just blank space. Elaine arrived without knocking, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a manila folder. "You look like someone who's decided on something," she said, setting the drinks down. Lillian passed her the printed copy of the email she'd retrieved from her trash folder. "Apparently, I'm hosting a party I wasn't invited to," Elaine read, snorted. 40 people. At your house? And catering under your name? Oh, honey. She's got nerves made of stainless steel. Or credit made of mine, Lillian said dryly. Elaine took a sip of coffee, then opened her folder. Good thing we're doing this today. Inside were blank estate forms, the same kind Craig Mendel had given her before her husband's passing. Lillian felt a ripple of unease, but not hesitation. It's time, isn't it? Elaine nodded. You've spent your life signing other people's dreams. Sign your own this time. At Harbor and Finch Estate Law, Craig's office was warm, lined with leather-bound volumes and the faint scent of pine polish. He looked up from his computer as the women entered. Back so soon, he asked. Lillian smiled slightly. I'd like to finalize some things. Craig motioned for her to sit. You're making the changes we discussed. Yes, my assets, my accounts, and the house, all to be transferred upon my passing to the Veterans Housing Trust and the Literacy Project. Elaine added, no family beneficiaries. Not anymore. Craig studied Lillian for a beat, as if weighing whether to comment. Then he nodded. All right, we'll notarize it today. The printer hummed. Papers slid out page by page. Lillian signed each one with her usual precision, initials crisp in the corners. When Craig handed her the final copy, his tone softened. You're certain about this? There's no going back once it's filed. Lillian met his eyes. That's the point. The notary stamped the last page, the sound like a small, decisive hammer. That evening, Lillian settled into her recliner with a cup of tea. The house was quiet except for the wind against the windows. Her email pinged again, a notification forwarded automatically from Stephanie's address book. Guest list updated. 42 confirmed. Vendor deliveries scheduled to Lillian Hart residence, Friday between 2-4 p.m. Her address again bolded. The audacity was almost breathtaking. Lillian scrolled once, then closed her laptop and reached for her phone. On her neighborhood association page, small, local, full of retirees and garden photos, she typed a single message. To all who received notice of a gathering at my home this weekend, there will be no event held here. Please disregard any invitations or listings. Lillian Hart. She hit post. Within minutes, likes and comments began to appear. Good for you. Always something with that generation, huh? Proud of you, Lillian. She didn't reply to any of them. Instead, she opened the blinds just enough to see her own reflection in the dark glass. Sharp, deliberate, unbothered. Across town, Stephanie's phone buzzed. She read the post twice, color rising in her cheeks. She can't do that, she hissed, pacing across the living room. Everything's already booked. Ryan sat on the couch, eyes fixed on his laptop screen. You should have asked first. I told her, Stephanie snapped. She didn't object. She didn't agree either, he said quietly. Stephanie's jaw clenched. She's trying to humiliate me, again. Ryan didn't answer. Outside, the wind carried a chill through the half-built pergola in their yard, the one they'd planned to finish after the refinance. It rattled against its frame like something warning them what was coming. At home, Lillian blew out the candle beside her chair and glanced at the freshly stamped will on her table. The ink was still drying. For the first time in years, she felt no tension in her chest, no lingering question of whether she'd gone too far. She hadn't gone far enough yet. She turned off the lamp, letting darkness claim the room, and whispered to the quiet, Now we begin. Friday arrived gray and wind-bitten, the kind of Boise morning that promised snow but only delivered cold. Lillian woke early, fed the cat, and brewed her coffee. From the window above the sink, the sky looked heavy, same as her resolve. By noon, the first car rolled up. A sleek black SUV parked crooked at the curb. Stephanie stepped out, wrapped in a camel coat and indignation. She looked at the house as though it had betrayed her personally. Lillian stood behind the living room curtain, unseen. The glass reflected half her face and half the world outside, one calm, one unraveling. Stephanie climbed the porch steps, her heels clicking with controlled fury, a box of sample menus tucked under one arm, phone in the other. She rang the doorbell twice, then a third time for emphasis. Lillian didn't move. Through the fabric slit, she watched Stephanie pace. The woman muttered into her phone, her free hand slicing through the air. From her lips, fragments of words reached the glass. Unprofessional, ridiculous, after all she owes. The wind picked up, tossing strands of Stephanie's hair across her face. She smoothed them back, checked her phone again, waited another 30 seconds, then stomped back down the steps. Her breath smoked in the cold air, visible proof of her anger. The SUV doors slammed. The tires bit into the gravel and pulled away. Lillian exhaled, slow and steady. The house creaked as if relieved. She turned from the window, poured the last of her coffee down the sink, and whispered, "That's done." An hour later, her phone chimed. A text from Ryan. "Ryan, could you be the bigger person for the kids?" Lillian stared at the screen for a long time. The words were so familiar they almost sounded like a family motto. Be the bigger person. The phrase they'd used to excuse every bruise of disrespect, every unreturned favor, every silence that followed cruelty. She didn't reply. Instead, she scrolled to her contacts and tapped Elaine's name. Her friend answered on the first ring. "I saw the SUV parked out front earlier. I was ready to call animal control." Lillian smiled. She didn't stay long. "She never does when she's not being fed," Elaine said. "What did Ryan say this time?" "He asked me to be the bigger person, for the kids." Elaine gave a dry laugh. "You were the bigger person. That's why they stood on you." Lillian's smile faded, replaced by something quieter. Acceptance, maybe, or exhaustion. "Then I suppose it's time I stood up." That afternoon, she drove downtown. The Veterans Housing Trust occupied a modest office on State Street. No marble floors, no front desk receptionist. Just a bulletin board of thank you letters and framed photos of families standing in front of homes they never thought they'd have. A young coordinator with kind eyes greeted her. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes," Lillian said, handing over a neatly folded check. "I'd like to make a contribution, in memory of my husband. Richard Hart, $50,000. The woman blinked. That's incredibly generous. He served. It feels right." The coordinator took the check gently, almost reverently. "Would you like us to notify anyone?" "No," Lillian said. "This isn't a statement. It's a settlement." Later that evening, Craig Mendel met her at his office after hours, still in his shirt sleeves. He looked surprised but not unprepared when she handed him a sealed envelope. "My final revisions," she said. "The will we notarized last week. I've removed all family beneficiaries. The remainder goes to the trust and the literacy fund." He raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" "Completely," he hesitated. "I have to say, Lillian, it's unusual to see someone this resolute." She met his gaze. "It's unusual to mistake obligation for love this long." He nodded slowly, then stamped the update, initials neat and final. "Then it's done." When she stepped outside, the street lamps had flickered on, halos of light in the cold air. Snow had begun to fall, slow and deliberate, dusting the sidewalks white. Back home, Lillian hung her coat, turned off the porch light, and paused at the window again. The driveway was empty, the world outside still. Her reflection stared back at her, serene, composed, and utterly alone. But this solitude didn't sting. It hummed, alive with quiet satisfaction. Her phone buzzed once more, a new message from Ryan. She didn't open it. Instead, she powered the phone off, set it face down on the counter, and drew the curtain closed. For the first time in years, the house felt like hers. Outside, the snowfall thickened, covering the porch steps in a thin white veil. By morning, there would be no trace anyone had ever come to her door. The weekend passed in white silence. Snow covered everything: rooftops, mailboxes, even the tire tracks that had once scarred her driveway. By Monday, it was as if no one had ever come. No one had ever stood shouting on her porch. Lillian sat at the kitchen table, pen poised above a blank notepad, the phone resting beside her. She'd ignored every call from Ryan since Friday, but one name kept drawing her eye. Ava. For days she'd told herself the kids were innocent of their parents' choices. But innocence doesn't erase silence, and silence, she knew now, was how rot begins. Finally, she dialed. The ringtone stretched, 2, 3, 4 chimes, before a cautious young voice answered. Grandma. Lillian smiled, though her throat tightened. Hello, sweetheart. I wasn't sure if this number still worked. Mom doesn't like me talking on the phone much lately, Ava said, voice small. Then, quickly, but it's okay. I'm glad you called. The words landed like light on cold glass, gentle but real. Lillian hesitated. I didn't want to put you in the middle of anything. A pause. The sound of her granddaughter breathing, thinking. Then, I just didn't like how Mom talked to you that day at brunch. Lillian closed her eyes. Behind them, she could still see the coffee cup cooling in her hands. Stephanie's smile stretched thin and cruel. That wasn't your fault, Ava. Or Lucas's. You're never the reason for adult choices. Ava sniffled. Dad says you're mad at us. No, Lillian said softly. I'm disappointed, but not in you. There was a rustle on the other end, like a door opening and closing. Ava whispered quickly, I have to go, but I love you, Grandma. The line went dead before Lillian could say it back. She stayed there a long moment, the dial tone humming in her ear. Then she pressed the phone to her chest and whispered it anyway. I love you too. The next day, her phone buzzed again. No name, just a short message. Lucas. That was it. A single heart. No words, no punctuation. But the meaning was loud enough to fill the room. Lillian smiled through the ache. Children see more than anyone admits. They always had. By mid-afternoon, she was at her desk, the same oak one she'd used when balancing payrolls decades ago. Now it held stationery, thick paper, her favorite pen, and a stack of envelopes addressed in her steady cursive. She began with Ava. My darling girl, when people are loud, it's usually because they're afraid of being small. Don't let noise guide your kindness. It's okay to grow without taking anyone's approval with you. Then Lucas. Dear Luke, you have your father's quiet heart. Guard it well, but don't let silence protect others from truth. Speak even when it trembles. She wrote each letter carefully, her words deliberate, measured, warm. There were no checks inside, no folded cash, no promises of tuition or trust funds. Just love. Love unburdened. When she sealed the last envelope, she felt something inside her unclench. She carried them to the post office herself, dropping them into the brass slot one by one. Each envelope landed with a soft thud, final, hopeful. Outside, the snow had turned to a thin drizzle, melting on contact with the pavement. Lillian lifted her face to it, letting a few drops fall cold against her cheeks. It felt cleansing. 2 days later, Elaine showed up with her usual sharp humor and a grocery bag of scones. You look lighter, she said, setting them down. I mailed them letters, Lillian replied. The kids, just letters, no money, Elaine grinned. That's how they'll know it's real. Lillian chuckled softly, then glanced at her phone on the counter, silent, dark. No calls, no messages. She didn't know that on the other side of town, the envelopes had been intercepted. Stephanie stood at the kitchen counter, sorting mail when she saw the familiar looping script. She slit one open, scanned the first lines, and her mouth tightened. Without hesitation, she slid both letters back into their envelopes, resealed them with tape, and tucked them into a drawer beside the junk mail. When Ava came in later, Stephanie handed her the phone. Your grandmother called again, she said lightly. I blocked her. It's for the best. Ava looked down, confused. Why? Because she doesn't respect boundaries, Stephanie said, voice smooth and final. Now, go set the table. The girl obeyed, but her shoulders drooped, as if she could feel something precious slipping away. That night, back in her quiet house, Lillian set her phone beside her teacup, waiting for nothing. The world outside was still, her porch light casting a faint gold circle across the snow. She didn't know her messages had been stolen mid-flight. She only knew the silence had changed its tone, no longer peace, but distance. Still, she whispered into it, as if the words might find their way through anyway. "Good night, my loves." And somewhere across town, in a darkened bedroom, a 13-year-old boy scrolled through his phone, opened an old text, and sent one more heart. The morning mail brought the final confirmation, a thick envelope from Boise West Bank, stamped completed transactions. Inside, 3 forms, each crisp, official, and merciless. Account closures finalized, automatic transfers terminated, third-party access removed. Lillian laid the papers flat on her kitchen counter. The ink glowed faintly in the winter light. Her name stood alone at the bottom of every page. No co-signer, no secondary, no shared authority. For the first time in over a decade, she belonged entirely to herself. Her phone buzzed. A new message from Craig Mendel. All transfers confirmed canceled. Mortgage co-signer release accepted. You're clear. Lillian smiled faintly, replying with a simple, "Thank you, Craig, for everything." Then, after a pause, she opened her laptop and drafted a new email. To Ryan Hart, subject, financial updates. She wrote only one line, "I've retired from rescuing you." No explanation, no signature beyond her name. She clicked send and sat back, feeling the quiet bloom inside her chest. Across town, Ryan's phone pinged during a client meeting. He glanced down, frowned, and paled. Stephanie noticed the look immediately. "What?" He turned the screen toward her. She read the email twice, her jaw tightening. "She can't mean that," Stephanie said. "She's bluffing." Ryan shook his head. "She's never bluffed in her life." Within an hour, Stephanie was on the phone with the bank, her voice syrupy at first, then sharp. "Yes, hello. I'm calling about joint access to account ending in 3179. "Yes, under Ryan and Lillian Hart." "Ma'am," the representative interrupted gently. "Your name isn't listed on that account." "I handle the bills," Stephanie said quickly. "There must be some mistake. I've made dozens of transfers." "I'm sorry, ma'am," the voice repeated, firmer now. "You're not authorized. Only Mrs. Lillian Hart or her designated power of attorney may access or inquire about that account." The silence that followed was volcanic. When she finally spoke again, Stephanie's voice trembled with fury. "She's destroying us." The representative's tone remained polite, indifferent. "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" Stephanie hung up without answering. That afternoon, Lillian met a locksmith at her front door, a cheerful man with cold reddened hands and a small toolbox. "New deadbolt, fresh keys," he said. "Quick job, ma'am." Lillian watched as he worked, the smell of metal and lubricant filling the entryway. When he finished, she paid in cash and pocketed the keys, smooth and silver, still warm from his hand. As he left, he paused. "Feels good, doesn't it?" "Changing locks?" Lillian smiled faintly. "It does." When the door closed, she walked to her desk and updated her emergency contact forms. Doctor, insurance, utilities, each one replacing Ryan Hart with Elaine Porter. It took less than 15 minutes to erase a decade of assumed dependability. That evening, Elaine dropped by, snow dusting her coat shoulders. She set down a bottle of wine, uncorked it, and poured 2 glasses. "So," she said, raising her glass, "how does it feel to be unshackled?" Lillian tilted hers in a quiet toast. "Light, strange, but right." Elaine grinned. "Cut the rope, climb the hill." Lillian chuckled softly. "The view's getting clearer." They drank in companionable silence, the fire crackling low in the hearth. For a moment, the world outside seemed peaceful, just falling snow, no phones, no emails, no expectations. But peace doesn't stay quiet for long. At 10:37 p.m., her voicemail light blinked red. Lillian let it play on speaker as she washed her teacup. Stephanie's voice filled the kitchen, shrill, cracking at the edges. "You're destroying our family. Do you even understand that? You're making Ryan sick. You're embarrassing us in front of everyone. This isn't you, Lillian. This is Elaine, or that lawyer, or God." What did we ever do to deserve this? The message ended with a ragged breath and a sharp click. Lillian dried the cup, placed it in the cabinet, and stood for a long moment staring at the phone. Then she pressed delete. Outside, wind pushed snow against the window, whispering like something alive. She pulled the curtain aside just enough to see her reflection in the glass. Soft light, calm eyes, the faintest trace of a smile. They finally noticed, she murmured. Good. Sunday afternoon arrived, wrapped in a brittle sunlight that made everything look sharper, the frost on the mailbox, the faint steam rising from her coffee. The edges of memory she'd stopped sanding down. Lillian was reading by the window when a shadow crossed her porch. She didn't need to stand to know who it was. Ryan's silhouette, tall but slouched, hands tucked in his coat pockets, like a boy rehearsing regret. A bouquet of supermarket lilies dangled awkwardly from one hand. He rang the doorbell once. Then again. Lillian set her book aside, but didn't move immediately. She let him wait. The bell chimed a third time before she opened the door, not wide, just enough to meet his eyes. "Mom," he said, voice rough. "Can we talk?" "Talking seems to have lost its value around here," she said. He swallowed. "Please, just a minute." Lillian studied him, his tired face, the anxious shift of his shoulders. She stepped back, granting him a single step inside. The air between them was cold, even though the heat was on. Ryan held out the flowers like an apology he didn't understand. "These are for you. I know things have gotten out of hand." She glanced at the bouquet. The petals were already beginning to curl at the edges. "You brought me something dying," she said quietly. He flinched. She didn't mean what she said, okay? She's under pressure, with the house and the kids, and everything's falling apart right now. Lillian's tone didn't rise, but it deepened. "Stress doesn't create cruelty, Ryan. It reveals it." He looked down, shame flickering across his face. "Mom, please, don't do this. You can't just erase us." "I didn't erase anyone," she said. "I stopped funding a lie." He stepped closer, desperation creeping into his voice. "At least think of the kids. They love you. You can't cut them out of the will." "What kind of example is that?" "The kind that teaches them what silence costs." He stared at her. "They're children. They'll remember who stood silent," she said, each word measured, final. "And maybe one day they'll understand that love without honesty isn't love. It's debt." The air went still. For a moment, he looked exactly as he had at 16, lost, searching for someone to take responsibility for the mess. But she wouldn't play that part anymore. Lillian picked up the bouquet, its stems slick and cold, and held it out to him. "Take these back. Flowers die when they're cut from their roots. Families, too." He hesitated, then accepted them. His eyes were wet now, not from grief, but from the confusion of a man realizing too late that the rescue line had been pulled. "Mom," he whispered. "What do you want me to say?" "Nothing," she said gently. "Just start living within your means, financially, emotionally, morally. That'll be enough." He nodded, defeated. The lilies trembled in his hands. When he turned to leave, she didn't stop him. The sound of the door closing behind him was softer than she expected, like snow falling on old wood. The house grew quiet again. Only the faint tick of the wall clock filled the room. Lillian walked to her desk, where her laptop screen glowed with a new message notification. It was from Craig Mendel. Subject: Final estate execution documents. All filings complete. Changes are now irrevocable. You are fully disengaged from all prior financial and estate ties. Congratulations, Lillian. She exhaled through her nose, slow and steady. The word irrevocable carried a strange peace. It didn't sound harsh, it sounded earned. She closed the email and looked toward the window. Outside, Ryan's car idled at the curb for a long minute before finally pulling away. The bouquet sat forgotten on his passenger seat, its petals shaking with the motion. Lillian turned off the lamp beside her chair. The room dimmed to the warm glow of the dying fire. "Let them remember this day," she murmured to herself. When the saving stopped, the wind outside rose again, scattering a drift of snow across her porch, the same place her son had just stood. Within moments, the footprints vanished. It began on a Sunday evening, the same hour most families scrolled through half-finished dinners and filtered smiles. Stephanie's post appeared first on the neighborhood page, wrapped in righteousness and wounded pride. Some people talk about family values, but forget what family means. When a mother turns her back on her son and grandchildren after all we've done together, it's heartbreaking. Please keep Ryan and the kids in your prayers during this difficult time. The photo beneath it showed Stephanie and Ryan on their porch. The children pulled close, everyone framed in soft winter light. It was cropped just enough to hide the foreclosure notice taped to the front window. Within minutes, the comments started. "So sorry, Steph. Some people forget loyalty." "Prayers for reconciliation." Then another. "Didn't she pay for your house?" By the next morning, the thread had grown long enough to need scrolling. Some defended her, others questioned the story. One neighbor quietly posted, "There are always two sides." Lillian didn't read any of it directly. Elaine did. She printed a few screenshots, shaking her head as she spread them across Lillian's kitchen table like evidence at a trial. "They're trying to stage a sympathy parade," Elaine said, tapping one photo. "But half the town's seen those kids in private school uniforms. No one believes they were the victims." Lillian sipped her tea, unbothered. Let her talk. Noise is all she has left. Elaine leaned back, smiling. "You're officially unflappable." "Not unflappable," Lillian said. "Just finished." 2 days later, an email arrived from the Veterans Housing Trust. The subject line read simply, "Your contribution in action." Inside was a photograph of a young couple standing in front of a small renovated duplex. A plaque on the door read, "The Richard and Lillian Hart Home." Lillian traced the lettering on the screen with her fingertip. The man's posture, protective, proud, reminded her of Richard the day he'd come home from his last deployment. She felt something warm rise in her throat. Not sadness, but gratitude. A second message followed hours later, forwarded by Elaine. "Lillian Hart, we're honored to inform you that a literacy scholarship will bear your name, supporting adult learners across Ada County. Your quiet generosity has already changed lives." Elaine's note beneath it read, "They're printing the announcement next month. Hope you're ready to be famous for all the right reasons." Lillian smiled. "The right reasons are enough," she murmured. That night, she opened a fresh notebook, the one she'd bought weeks ago, and kept waiting on her desk. The first page felt smooth under her palm, almost ceremonial. She uncapped her pen and began to write. "I used to believe love meant stepping in. Now I know it means stepping back." The words came slowly at first, then gathered momentum. She wrote about the years she'd measured affection in bank drafts and guilt. About the morning she realized peace doesn't arrive with forgiveness, but with boundaries. She didn't intend to publish any of it. She only wanted the truth to exist somewhere unedited. Hours passed. When she finally looked up, the room had gone dark except for the desk lamp. Outside, snow drifted against the window like static, soft and endless. On her phone, a new alert blinked. Another tag, another thread growing online. She ignored it, turned the phone face down, and wrote one more line before closing the notebook. "They mistook my silence for weakness. They'll learn it was freedom." She switched off the lamp, leaving the notebook open on the desk. The faint smell of ink lingered in the room. Somewhere beyond the snow and the chatter of neighbors, her name was beginning to belong to better things. The letter arrived on a Wednesday, slipped between circulars and a heating bill. Lillian almost missed it. White envelope, neat handwriting, the kind that comes from concentration rather than confidence. She turned it over and saw the return address. A. Hart. Her heart gave one small, unsteady beat. Lillian carried it to the table, made tea she didn't drink, and opened the envelope with care. The paper inside was ruled notebook stock, folded twice. The handwriting was uneven, letters curling into each other like they were trying to hide. "Dear Grandma, Mom said you're mad. I don't think that's true, but I guess it's okay if it is. I miss you. I still have the book you gave me last summer. I've been reading it out loud to Lucas. He likes the funny parts. I don't really know what happened. Dad doesn't talk much, and Mom says you stopped helping us because you don't care anymore, but I don't think that's it. I think maybe you just got tired of being hurt. I'm sorry if we made you feel that way. I love you anyway. Love, Ava." I'm a mother of 2. I never finished high school, but last month I read my first book all the way through. I just wanted to say thank you for giving me the chance to know the feeling of finishing something I started. When my little girl asked what the word inherit means, I told her it's when someone gives you something that changes your life. I think that's what you did for us. With gratitude, Maria Lopez Lillian read the letter twice, then a third time. Her throat tightened, but the feeling wasn't sorrow, it was recognition, deep and steady, like seeing her own reflection in another woman's words. She took the letter to her study, where her open notebook waited. Between entries about bank ledgers and quiet reckonings, she slipped Maria's note between the pages and wrote in the margin, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what finally leaves you lighter." She closed the book, set her pen aside, and turned toward the window. The sunset bled gold across the foothills, the same hue as the plaque on that new wall downtown. Outside, a robin landed on the porch rail, small, steady, unafraid. Lillian smiled. Guess we both survived winter. It was late afternoon when the knock came, a soft, uncertain rhythm that didn't belong to delivery men or neighbors. Lillian paused in the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Through the curtain, she saw a slim figure on the porch, shoulders drawn, hands tucked into the sleeves of a denim jacket. Ava. For a moment, Lillian simply watched her, older now, almost 17, with her father's quiet stance but none of his cowardice. Then she opened the door. The girl's voice was careful. "Hi, Grandma." "Hi, sweetheart." They stood in the doorway for a beat too long, both unsure whether to bridge the gap or let it hang. Then Ava spoke again, words tumbling out fast. "I don't want anything. I just didn't want silence anymore." Lillian's throat tightened. "Then come in. I was about to make cookies." A small smile flickered across Ava's face, tentative but real. "The chocolate chip kind?" "Is there another kind worth making?" The kitchen filled with familiar sounds, the click of the oven, the rustle of parchment paper, the soft thud of measuring cups against the counter. Ava cracked the eggs too hard, the way she always used to, and laughed when one shell fell into the bowl. They didn't talk about the past at first. They talked about school, about her part-time job at a bookstore, about Lucas and how he'd joined the soccer team. It was all surface talk, but the warmth underneath was unmistakable. When the first batch came out golden, they stood shoulder to shoulder at the counter, tasting one warm from the tray. Ava's voice dropped low. "I didn't know about the letters until last month. Mom kept them." Lillian nodded once. "I figured." Ava looked at her hands. "I found one of them when I was cleaning her office. I read it. The one where you said I didn't owe you anything but a good life." Her eyes shimmered. "I didn't know grown-ups could write like that, like, love doesn't need anything back." Lillian set the spatula down gently. "Real love doesn't." For a moment, the only sound was the faint ticking of the oven timer. Then Ava stepped forward and pressed her face against Lillian's shoulder. She began to cry, quietly, almost apologetically. Lillian held her, wordless, her hand resting against the girl's hair. The rhythm of Ava's breathing steadied after a while, turning into the small hiccups of release. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were swollen, but her voice was clear. "You're the only person I ever felt safe around." Lillian brushed a strand of hair from her granddaughter's face. "Then be someone others feel safe around." Ava nodded, understanding more than words could explain. They baked until dusk, filling tins with cookies they'd never finish. When the last tray cooled, Ava reached for her phone. "Let's take a picture." Lillian hesitated. "A picture?" "Yeah, just us. No filters, no captions, just memory." The girl held the phone out, their faces framed by the golden light from the kitchen window. The photo caught them mid-laugh, Lillian's hand still dusted with flour, Ava's eyes bright and red-rimmed. Afterward, Ava slipped the phone into her pocket and hugged her again, tighter this time. "I'll come back," she said. "Next time, I'll bring Lucas." Lillian smiled. "There'll be cookies waiting." When the door finally closed, the house didn't feel empty. The air still held the warmth of baking, of laughter, of something returned. She sat in her recliner and opened her notebook, adding one new line under the day's date. Some bridges rebuild themselves, one heartbeat at a time. Outside, the first evening stars appeared, faint but steady, proof that even the smallest lights can find their way home. The photograph didn't stay a secret for long. Ava had posted it to her private feed. No caption, just the image of her and Lillian laughing in a sunlit kitchen, flowers still on their hands. Within a day, Stephanie saw it. By evening, the house on Waverly Ridge was a storm cell. "Are you out of your mind?" Stephanie's voice cracked across the living room like a whip. "Do you have any idea what that woman has done to us?" Ava stood near the stairs, backpack still slung over one shoulder. "She didn't do anything to you. She just stopped letting you use her." Ryan sat at the far end of the sofa, elbows on his knees, gaze fixed on the carpet. He didn't move, didn't speak. The muted TV behind him flickered with a home improvement show, cheerful, oblivious. The sound turned low. Stephanie pointed at the screen of her phone, shaking. "Look at this, Ryan. She's bragging. The whole town sees that stupid photo, her house, her cookies, her fake little halo. You think people don't know it's our daughter standing next to her?" Ava's reply was quiet but clear. "They know, that's why they liked it." Stephanie blinked, caught off guard by the steadiness in the girl's voice. "Excuse me?" "She's the only one who ever showed up without strings," Ava said. Ryan rubbed a hand over his face. "Ava, don't—" "No, Dad." Her voice broke only once, then found its edge again. "You keep saying family first, but all that ever meant was mom first. Grandma actually saw us." Stephanie's tone sharpened to glass. "She took everything from us." Ava's jaw tightened. "No," she said. "You just never earned it." The silence that followed was the kind that hums, thick, electric. Stephanie's mouth opened and closed, searching for words sharp enough to reassert control. None came. Upstairs, Lucas's bedroom door cracked open. His small face peeked down the hall, eyes wide, frightened. Ava turned and saw him. "It's okay, Luke," she said softly. "Go back to bed." He didn't. He came down 2 steps, whispering, "Did she really take everything?" Ava looked at her brother. "No, buddy. She just stopped giving it away." Stephanie pressed a hand to her forehead. "You don't understand, either of you. We built this family together, and she—" "Paid for it," Ava finished. Ryan finally stood. His voice was tired, nearly toneless. "Enough. Everyone stop yelling." "I'm not yelling," Ava said quietly. "I'm just done pretending." She turned for the door. Stephanie lunged a step forward, then froze, realizing the gap between them had already widened beyond reach. The door shut gently behind her. Ryan stayed where he was, staring at the empty space his daughter had left behind. The heater clicked off, and the house fell into a dense, unfamiliar quiet. Stephanie wrapped her arms around herself. "She'll come back." Ryan didn't answer. Across town, the night was calm. Lillian sat in her armchair, a blanket over her knees, reading by the fire. The pages glowed amber in the hearthlight. Every few minutes she paused to listen, the creak of the house settling, the slow rhythm of her own breathing. On the end table lay a small silver frame, the same photo Ava had taken. It had arrived by mail that morning in a plain envelope, no note attached. Lillian had smiled when she saw it. She hadn't needed words. Now she studied it again. The captured laughter suspended in time. The faces told her everything she needed to know, that some wounds heal quietly, without permission. She closed the book on her lap and leaned back, eyes half closed. Outside, the wind moved through the birches, steady and cold. Somewhere far away, maybe across town, a door had closed on a lie. And though Lillian couldn't see it, she felt the shift. The moment when silence stopped meaning absence and started meaning peace. Autumn returned, gentler this time. The maples along Lillian Street burned gold, their leaves drifting across sidewalks like forgotten promises. The air carried the faint scent of wood smoke and the low murmur of something ending well. Lillian sat at her desk, reviewing the last chapter of her manuscript. The title gleamed at the top of the page, "Grace Withdrawn, How I Let Go to Breathe." Her handwriting covered the margins, notes in careful pencil, a lifetime distilled into truth. She didn't write it for publication, not at first. But Craig had read a few chapters and insisted. "This isn't confession," he'd told her. "It's testament." Now, weeks later, the file was printed, bound, and mailed to a small independent press in Portland that specialized in memoirs by women over 60. She didn't expect fame. She only wanted her story to live somewhere outside her 4 walls, solid, undeniable, hers. When the confirmation email arrived, she smiled faintly, folded her glasses, and whispered, "That's enough." Days passed quietly. The house held its warmth better now, the silence friendly instead of hollow. Ava visited often, always unannounced, always bringing something homemade. One afternoon, she left a small note on the kitchen counter, started volunteering at the literacy center. "It feels like being close to you, even when I'm not here." The handwriting was neater than before, more certain. Lillian kept the note pressed between the pages of her notebook, beside Maria Lopez's letter. Ryan never called. Not once. The absence no longer ached. It had become space she could breathe in. A month later, an invitation arrived in a cream envelope bearing the logo of the Idaho Women's Literacy Endowment. "We invite you to join us for the dedication of our new reading lounge, honoring your extraordinary generosity and impact. The Lillian Hart Room." Lillian smiled as she read it. The name didn't feel boastful, it felt returned, restored to its rightful owner. When she and Elaine entered the building that Saturday morning, sunlight poured through wide glass windows. A plaque shimmered on the far wall. "The Lillian Hart Reading Lounge for every woman who was told she couldn't." Inside, volunteers arranged books on new shelves. Among them was Ava, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, helping a younger woman alphabetize donations. She looked up, saw her grandmother, and grinned. A bright, uncomplicated smile that filled the room. Elaine nudged Lillian's arm. "You realize you're a monument now, right?" Lillian chuckled. "I prefer a footnote with good lighting." They watched Ava greet the arriving families, her laughter echoing through the hall. For a moment, Lillian saw not the loss, but the lineage. Kindness reborn in another generation, untethered from guilt. Elaine turned toward her, eyes glistening. This is what legacy looks like." Lillian exhaled softly. "They thought I'd go quietly. I just went somewhere better." That evening, Elaine hosted a small dinner for Lillian's 75th birthday. No speeches, no crowd, just wine, warmth, and the hum of music from an old record player. After dessert, Elaine raised her glass. "To the rope you cut, and the wings you grew." Lillian laughed, shaking her head. "You and your metaphors." "Admit it," Elaine said, smiling through tears. "You like this one." Lillian lifted her glass, eyes reflecting the candlelight. "I do, because it's true." She paused, letting the quiet settle, then added, "They fell. I walked." The room held still for a moment, the words hanging between them, weightless, final, right. Later that night, alone again, she sat by the fire with her notebook open to the last page. The house ticked softly around her, familiar and forgiving. She picked up her pen and wrote her final line. "I cut the rope that held up her entire lifestyle, and watched them all fall without my name to catch them." She set the pen down, closed the cover, and let her hand rest on it for a moment, feeling the pulse of her own story beneath her fingers. Outside, the wind rose gently, scattering a few golden leaves against the window pane. Lillian looked up, smiled, and whispered into the quiet, "That's how you let go." The fire crackled once, soft applause for an ending earned.